In some ways, the question of where it all started is an interesting one for me, because I do a presentation about juggling, and as a part of that I have to introduce where it all started from. So I tell a story that's been honed over the past 15 years of telling the story, and as a result that's got a little bit confused with the reality of where it was. I remember it one way, but it's not necessarily where it was. But what I remember is going along to the juggling club meeting in Cambridge and being shown 5, because that's what I asked for, and going away and trying to practice. Now, I am unable to practice. I am congenitally unable to practice. And after about 20 minutes, which for me was a long time, I was deeply frustrated with not being able to do 5. I found out later that once you can do 4, 5 is maybe 6 to 12 months away of on-off work. And I looked around the room and you think, okay, so there are 40 people at this meeting. They're not all going to be standing around doing 3, but none of them were doing 5. And what were they doing? Well, there were a few who were doing 4, and there were nutters down that end who were doing machetes and unlit fire torches, and there were people down that end who were passing clubs between each other, and a nutter on a unicycle doing a figure of 8 around them. Small crowd of onlookers hoping they'd get it wrong. But everybody else was doing just 3. And you'd think it would be incredibly tedious for everybody just doing sort of a cascade all night or a shower all night, and sure enough it would be. I mean, there were a few who delighted in that, but we left them to themselves mostly. But everybody else was doing 3-ball tricks. And I thought, if I get a great big long list of 3-ball tricks, then I can practice the first one until I get bored, 20 seconds later, and I can practice the next one until I get bored, 20 seconds later, and keep doing this. I'm constantly practicing, so I'll improve. Changing what I'm doing so I won't get too bored. And so I went up to somebody and said, show me a 3-ball trick. So they showed me one over the top. Went to somebody else and said, show me a 3-ball trick. They showed me the body throws. In particular, under the leg, behind the back, over the shoulder, under the arm, under the chin, off the head, bouncing off parts of the body. Went up to somebody else, said, show me a 3-ball trick. It was Mike Day, and I said, show me a 3-ball trick. And he said, well, first you've got to learn one over the top. I said, I know one over the top, and I know the body throws. And then he did Mill's Mess. And I stood there with my pen poised above the paper, and after a while I went, what are you doing? And he said, it's called Mill's Mess. And I said, yeah, but what are you actually doing? And so he ended up trying to write down a description of Mill's Mess. And this took 2 sides of A4 for a trick that lasts 3/4 of a second. And I thought, there's got to be an easier way. And so Mike and me and a couple of others thought there's got to be an easier way. We looked through back issues of juggling magazines that we had, Cascada, The Catch, Juggler's World. None of them had descriptions of juggling tricks. None of them. And so it looked like nobody had done this before. So we did what you always do when confronted by an interesting problem. We packed up all of our kit and went to the bar. And during the course of the evening came up with 7 or 8 brilliant ideas for how to solve this problem. Went back to somebody's place, drank lots of coffee. They sobered up. I became a bit more serious. I don't drink, so they didn't drink much anyway. You can't unicycle very much when drunk. And realised that every idea we'd had was rubbish. And we now knew why nobody had done it. It's hard. And this was in 1984, early 1984. And so at that point we thought, how can you describe juggling tricks? And what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do, was get a collection of tricks for a practicing schedule. And there was also a guy who came along to the juggling club and said, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? And I thought, well, yes, I can. I've done those. And then I found I couldn't, because I hadn't practiced them. And after a while we thought, well, we could also generate an encyclopedia of juggling with long lists of tricks and what they're related to and how to learn them and how to practice them and so on. We never got that far. Charlie Dancy did it, of course. But that's where it started, was how can you describe a juggling trick? And it seems like it's hard, and it is hard. It's very, very hard. Because in juggling, as in dance, there are very few things that you're not allowed to do. And the sheer freedom of juggling is the difficulty, because there's such scope for what you can do. How can you pin it down? Do you describe everything to the last twitch of eyebrow and the last shuffle of the feet to recover? Well, no, of course you don't. So how do you simplify? And once you've simplified, maybe oversimplified to make the problem easy enough that you can think about it, and then if you solve that, how do you then blow it back up to the whole thing? And that took us a good year. That's my memory of it. Other people may remember it slightly differently, but the elements are there. The ladder diagrams came in very early because what we wanted to do at that point was have on the paper what was going on. And so assuming that the hands remain level, that everything starts and finishes at about waist level, for example, you can tell how high a ball is just by how long it's been in the air. And so the space-time diagram, common to physics, mathematics, electronics, so many fields use the space-time diagram, was an easy and obvious way instantly to model where the balls are, particularly since juggling happens in this plane. So we only have to look at where the balls are on the ground on this single line, and then you imagine running forwards while you juggle with the balls leaving glowing trails behind them. And you can see that on the ground as the balls weave between the hands. So the space-time diagram came in very early. Absolutely, the way of diagramming it came in very early. And in fact, now we know that Charlie Simpson, who's Charlie Dancy, actually published in Juggler's World an article about diagramming juggling tricks. And he did that in 1983, I think. So that predated what we were doing, and none of us knew about it. So the diagrams came first, and most of us are visual thinkers anyway. So having that way of thinking about it came very naturally to us. And then we said, well, how often are the hands full? So how long should the ball be in the hand? And the hands, I mean, when you're doing a cascade or a fountain and it's async, the hands are doing this. Well, not quite, because your hand moves faster when it's empty than it does when it's full. But basically the hands are doing this. So you've got the hands doing this down your diagram, and then they've got the balls coming in at the right place. It's just too complicated. Let's straighten out where the hands are and not worry about exactly where the hands are, so that we can just have the times when the balls come in. And suddenly it's a lot simpler, because you've thrown away an irrelevant detail. We hope to put it back in later, and indeed we do put in later. We put a little star on something to say, well, this is an outside throw, or you put a bar across it or something. So you immediately we focused on what we think of as the natural way, because it's the way you do a cascade or a fountain. It throws on the inside, the catches on the outside. Makes the diagram much simpler. And then the question is, how often are the hands full? Are they full half the time? Are they full all the time? Are they full none of the time? Well, if you look at the hand, as you juggle, it spends some time empty and some time with a ball in it. So if you look at the line, with the diagram going down, if you look at the line that represents the hand, sometimes it will have a ball in it and sometimes it doesn't. So the times when it has a ball in it, the ball's got to come in, either from the other hand or from the same hand, then it's in the hand, and then it goes out, and then the hand is empty for a while. So the hand goes full, empty, full, empty. What's the ratio? Right? Different jugglers, it's different. And indeed, that's an area of variability that you might want to get rid of to make life easier. Now, what we focused on is, let's suppose that the hand is full all of the time. So what happens is you're holding a ball, you're holding a ball, you're holding a ball, there's a ball coming down, you're holding a ball, get rid of that one, catch that one. Right? So now you focus on the exchange as being a single instant. Right? That's the exchange, and the hand is always full. Now the problem with that is when you come down to doing, that's great when you're doing twos, because the hold is exactly what happens. But now if you do a one, it's got to go backwards in time. And this is very hard to explain. Why is a one going backwards in time? We all know it doesn't go backwards in time. So now you try and go with the hand empty all of the time. So the hand is empty, the ball comes in, bounces off. Right? Now that's obviously not what happens. But now, what we call the cycle time, the Siteswap number, actually is exactly how long the ball spends in the air. So it's much easier to talk about. But it's clearly wrong. The ball doesn't bounce off your hand.
So in fact, the Siteswap value is a sum of the dwell time.
The dwell time and the air time. That's exactly right. And if you do it as the air time once it's gone out, and then the dwell time, it's the time from this throw to this throw. And in fact, you can use that to show why the Siteswap for 5 balls is 5. So if you've got 5-ball cascade, so every ball's taking it in turns, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Each ball is thrown every 5th time. So it's got to take 5 beats before it's next thrown. So from throw to throw to throw is 5 beats. That's why it's a 5. Because it's in the air and it's in the hand, and the total cycle time is 5. That's the Siteswap number. And so that's why it ties up so nicely with the number of balls that you juggle. If you bring the dwell time to 0, all of the numbers are completely obvious as to why they all work. Now these days when I explain it, I actually assume a dwell time of 50%. I assume the hand is full, empty, full, empty. The diagrams work neatly, but now I have to explain why the air time is 4, the cycle time is 5 when you're doing 5 balls. And that becomes tricky. And in fact, it's interesting now that the hand full all the time interpretation has raised itself again as causal diagrams. The original space-time diagram that we had is what's now known as causal diagrams. That's what we had at the very beginning, and we threw away because it was too difficult to explain. There's too much going on in a ladder diagram. And that's what we found with the hands full all the time, gave us the ball bouncing off, but it means that in a 3-ball pattern you've got 1 ball bouncing off. And so you've got the event of the throw, the event of the throw, or the exchange, the event, the event. And if you think of it as this causes that event, which is Martin Frost's genius is finding this way of interpreting it. Now for him it's the natural way, but for everybody else, we couldn't understand this. I mean, to us it was just sort of, this is the way it's dropped out, it makes it easy to do the sums. In fact, the correct model has the hand full for 70 or 80% of the time. But he found a real physical interpretation, which means that we can go back to the much simpler diagram. But now you've got the question of, if you've got the ball bouncing back and forth in a 3-ball cascade, it's got 1 in the air. Why is it a cycle time of 3? And so you've got that interpretation again.
The way they've explained it to me, which I really like, is that a causal diagram just explains the problems.
Yes.
And as a juggler, if you're juggling 3 balls, your problem is only 1 ball. So
yes.
it's 3 minus your 2 hands.
Exactly. And that's the genius, is that way of finding that way of thinking about it to make it clean and clear and acceptable to people who won't take a ball going backwards, but will say that you have to do this in anticipation of that. You know this is going to happen, so you have to prepare for it. In a way, the causality can run backwards. Because you can anticipate what's got to happen.
Actually, that's a nice way of thinking of 1s and 0s, which definitely travel back on course.
Absolutely, absolutely. My recollection is that there were 4 of us there. Actually, there were more of us there the first night, but people kind of dropped out as they didn't think it was getting anywhere, or they thought that the problem was too hard, or they thought that the problem was too easy, or whatever. Mike Day. Absolutely brilliant juggler, very good mathematician if he would stick to it, but he didn't. He ended up going into computer science. Very good, incredibly good computer scientist. The way he thinks is remarkable. Adam Chalcraft, amazing mathematician. James Mellor, we never really got to know James particularly well outside of this context, but he was also doing maths. He graduated with a reasonable degree, and anybody who can get a maths degree is doing well. And me, of course, with a particularly specialist brain in mathematics as well. And it was the 4 of us who ended up really being involved in it, as my memory serves. There may have been others, but they haven't really brought themselves to the fore in my memory. And so it may just be that I didn't remember them, because I was friends with the other 3, and others may have dropped out on the way. We've lost contact with James, but I'm still in regular contact with Mike and Adam, and it would be useful to go back and actually check their memories. But certainly my memory is that Mike and Adam had most of the great ideas, and to some extent my role was being the catalyst, of being the person who needed it explained in the right terms for it to make sense to me. I mean, I contributed small things, no doubt, but Mike and Adam were perhaps the ones who had sort of 60 ideas, only 2 of which worked, and the other ones fell away as they couldn't explain them to me, because I need things explained sometimes in excruciating detail. No, it came over a long period of time, and it really was the ladder diagrams that we had to start with. It was the ladder diagrams which to us held the model. But you can't draw ladder diagrams on a text computer. And I mean, this was 1984. I mean, machines were primitive compared with what we have now. You couldn't just sort of whack up a diagram and email it to everybody. It just didn't happen like that. So we wanted a textual description of these diagrams, and it was only over a period of time that we realized that we actually labeled them with the kind of pattern that they belonged to, and realized that they actually fitted together, and then started to do the arithmetic underneath the Siteswaps. And if you start to do the question of, here's a sequence of numbers, is it a Siteswap or isn't it? And of course, to start with, the only thing you can do is try and fit it onto a ladder diagram and make sure that you get single balls tracing down it, that you don't end up with two balls landing in the same place on your diagram. You don't end up having to have a ball here with one popping out but nothing having come in. And so then we started to look at the arithmetic rules that underpinned it. And of course, as mathematicians, that was a very natural thing to do. And there's a lot of interesting stuff underneath that just told us that the idea was right, because everything fell out at that point. But there was no Eureka moment where somebody said, hang on, it's this. My memory isn't of a Eureka moment.
Right.
My memory of it is that we were drawing the diagrams and we put the numbers against it and then just put them down in order, because they would have to come in that order. So it's a sequence of numbers. And again, to a mathematician, these two things are obviously equivalent. There's no Eureka discovery for us, because this is the way we think, this is the way we do it. Yes, we were thinking that, and that was really a natural way of doing it, because when you do the 5-3 in the middle of four balls, or when you do 5-3 as a continuous thing, 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, which is one of the diagrams we wrote down, because we knew that was a trick we could do. It's triple single from clubs, right? So we wrote down that pattern on this, and then we put it, okay, these are all fives, these are all threes. Yes, these are all triples, these are all singles. We can do it with balls inside rather than clubs. So it was just such an obvious thing as it was falling out, and it was satisfying that it came out so easily, but there was no sudden light bulb go off. The place where the light bulb went off was this one. We started to write down the sequences that worked, and we wrote down 5-3 and lots of others, and we wrote down 5-5-2 and lots of others, the two high from the fountain with the hold. And then later on we wrote down the 5-5-5-5-0. So that's the flash out of four balls. And we suddenly realized that if you put 5-3, 5-5-2, and then left a gap and put 5-5-5-5-0, it fell into this nice pyramid with the last number decreasing and the fives on the inside of the pyramid. And if you put the fours across the top, you've got 4, 3, 2, gap, 0. It's obvious that you need a 1. It's obvious that you need the fives. 5, 5, 5, 1. It must be a juggling trick. And it was. And that told us that the whole thing worked. That told us that the whole thing was amazing. And when we took that to the European Convention that year, everybody was stunned by it. Nobody cared where it came from. They just wanted to juggle it. And it was new. And as far as we know, nobody had done it before. People have since said that there are a couple of people that they know who must have done it. But that's scarcely the same as saying they've seen it. And as far as we know, nobody had seen it. It's such a beautiful pattern. I mean, it's the fake 5. It looks like 5, it feels like 5, it sounds like 5 if you do it right, but it's only 4. It's perfect practice for 5, amongst other tricks. So that was the Eureka moment for us. That told us that this was so right, that it was utterly inevitable that it had to happen. And that's when we started to tell everybody we could about it, and that's when we realized that Bobo had done it, that Paul Klimek had done it, and there must be others. The name's Siteswap, right, okay. The easiest way of dealing with this is to look at an example of it, which is a triple single in the middle of 4-ball fountain. So do a 5-3 in the middle of 4 balls. If you do this and think about what's going on, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You throw a 5, you throw a 3, and everything else has to go back to being 4s. The 5 is going high. It's got to come down late, but it's got to come to this hand. So it's got to come down somewhere. And the place it's going to come down, it's going to take 1 beat longer, exactly 1 beat longer, because it's a 5 instead of a 4, exactly 1 beat longer. So you've thrown the 5, it's this beat This is the ball. If I threw it as a 4, they'd collide. So I've got to get rid of it some other way. So just for the moment, just get rid of it. And what happens is that that 5 slots into the hole that's left. That ball that I've got to get rid of, well, this hand only has one ball. There's going to be a hole in it. And so what I do is I throw this ball to land in that hole. So each ball fills the gap left by the other one. They exchange their landing sites. They swap their landing sites. It's a site swap. And if you look at the more complex ones, you can always think of it as throw the balls and have them come down in each other's places. Not necessarily just the one, but multiply. So if you do 5, 5, 5, 1, what's happening is that the first 3 that you throw are all coming, that was 4, if you're the first 3 that you throw, all come down 1 beat later, and the one that you were going to throw last slots in before them all. That's the one, that's the zap across. One way of thinking about 5, 5, 5, 1 is start juggling 5, and after you've got rid of 3 of them, you're about to run out. And if you throw the last one high, you'll have an empty hand. So short circuit it. Put the last one, instead of throwing it into the air, put the last one over here, and now you can start again. So you're rearranging their landing sites. It's swapping their sites. It's site swap. It's an ugly name. Juggling for the Complete Klutz. When was that published? Late 70s? 79, thereabouts? I will guarantee you that thousands of those were given to mathmo geeks and computer geeks and physics geeks as a joke present. And suddenly you've got thousands of science people, heavy science people who can juggle. And what are they going to do? They're going to think about it the way a scientist thinks about it. And that is a modelling way. They will want to model what's going on, and they will want to write it down. Oral tradition doesn't cut it in science. You have to document it clearly so that other people can do it from your written notes. So they're going to try and write it down. And so that means suddenly in the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, sounds familiar? Suddenly you've got thousands of people trying to write down juggling. Most of them will give up. It's hard. It's really hard because you can't actually do the whole thing. You can't write down everything about juggling tricks. One of the reasons that's hard is if you take a shower, you can mutate that as a continuous process into a half shower and back into a shower with the other hand. So you don't have right-hand shower, half shower, left-hand shower, and in the middle you've got synchronous showers. You don't have just the 5 tricks, you've actually got a continuum of tricks. And in fact, you've got huge spaces of tricks where you can gradually mutate this one into that one. And as a result, it's hard. How do you say what they all are? You've got to get some way of simplifying it. And everybody came up with the same simplification. They thought about it differently. Paul Clement thought about it differently. Boppo thought about it differently. We thought about it differently when I talked about it with Charles Brookman, who came up with it much later, but again, independently. He thought about it differently. Everybody I know thinks about it differently. And jugglers think about it differently again. Now, I don't know of any non-science jugglers who've come up with it. And I think that tells us that it must have been when the science community started juggling. And so many mathmo geeks and physics geeks can juggle. And indeed, the community, I think it's a shame that it almost splits, but there's enough crossover that I like to see it. But the community falls into those who perform, those who are interested in the artistic side of it, and those who are interested in the technical side. Once they've got the trick, they don't care what it looks like, they can do it, and they move on. And it's mostly the sciencey types who do that. And the performance types are usually the arts types. And what I love to see is coming up with a heavy technical trick that looks rubbish when I do it, and then the arts types haven't seen it before and they turn it into something that's superb. I mean, watching you juggle or watching the Gandini project do things and watching Catty juggle, it's just superb seeing the fluidity of these otherwise gawky, geeky, technical type tricks. And that crossover is what delights me to see, because it means that the science type people are giving something into the performance side. The performance side have given the science type people juggling in the first place. We would never have thought about it. I mean, you've got a descriptive notation here, and you can use it just to mechanically generate tricks, find the ones that look good and then start to do them. The ones that look bad, well, see if you can do something performance-wise to make it better. I mean, in the middle of a 3-ball cascade, 5-2-2 is just a nonsense. Throw one high and stand there and wait for it to come down. Yeah, what's the point? Well, you can pirouette in the middle of it. Suddenly it becomes interesting. One under the arm is, we've got notation for hand movements now. One under the arm is nothing. Do it constantly with this hand. It actually looks quite good. You get a nice flow. But if you suddenly do it with fire torches, you get the spin this way and then the spin this way. Suddenly it's great again. And so that cross-feeding is something that's very rare. The arts community normally doesn't feed the science community at all. But I've published papers in refereed journals because of a juggling-inspired aspect. You couldn't get more direct than that. And so, you know, it's there. The cross-connection is there. It goes both ways. And what it was Ramanujan was very ill, and he was in hospital, and Hardy went to visit him. And to make conversation, I mean, what do you do when you visit people in hospital? It's very difficult, particularly if the person's really quite ill. To make conversation, Hardy said, oh, the number of the taxi I rode in was very uninteresting. It was 1,729. And Ramanujan said, oh, on the contrary, it's a very interesting number. It's the first number that can be expressed as the sum of 2 cubes in 2 different ways. It's 10 cubed plus 9 cubed, or it's 12 cubed plus 1 cubed. And it's the first number where this happens. How can you know this? It's the most incredible thing to know, but Ramanujan was like that. I actually view siteswaps in 2 very different ways because I think of them as a juggler, and I have to have a way of bringing them under control. When I actually do a presentation, a maths talk with juggling as my hook, and it's actually about siteswaps, I finish by getting the audience to invent a siteswap, and I guarantee that I will juggle it. Now, I have not practiced every possible siteswap, so I have to have a way of bringing them under control. So I think of them as a mathematician in terms of their classification. And I think of small groupings of throws as families, in the same way as a pianist, you practice scales, arpeggios, speed exercises, particular runs, so that when you come to a piece, you think, okay, this collection of notes is just like that, this collection of notes is just like that, this collection of notes is just like that. Now I can string them together. You don't think in terms of notes, you think in terms of phrases, or you think in terms of clusters. And I think in terms of clusters of throws when I'm juggling. But as a mathematician, I look at the orbits of the balls. I think, okay, this ball goes here, and then here, cross there, and then here, cross here. Whereas this ball goes here, and then here, and then here. And that helps me focus on what's going on as I practice that. So I think of it from both of these points of view. And I deconstruct things that I'm learning so that I look at it from both points of view. And I find that without that, I just can't do it. I become one-dimensional in my attempts to juggle. Whereas looking at it from both sides, I get more of a shape of the whole trick, the whole pattern. As a mathematician, I love the relationships between these things. But as a juggler, there's no collection. I mean, as a juggler, something like 4-5-1-4-1 doesn't feel anything like 5-6-2-5-2. It's just not the same trick. It just doesn't look the same, it doesn't feel the same, it doesn't sound the same. There's no relationship. But as a mathematician, is mathematics discovered or invented? To some extent, I mean, there's 2 aspects to this question. One is, who cares? But it is an interesting speculation. Does mathematics, as a general thing, siteswaps as a specific example with a very practical realization, does it have an independent existence of us? Does the number 3 have an independent existence of us? You know, I can show you 100 buckets and ask you what's common. And you look at this one, it's got 3 apples. You look at this one, it's got 3 oranges. You look at this one, it's got 3 juggling balls. And they've all got 3 somethings. Sometimes it's not the same thing. They've all got 3. Okay, say, well, 3. They've all got 3 in common. But is 3 something with an independent existence? If you want to be that little bit sharper about it, does 0 have an independent existence? 0 was only accepted sort of handfuls of centuries ago. The negative numbers. I mean, as recently as the 1700s, people were still uncomfortable with the negative numbers, complex numbers. People are still unhappy about complex numbers. People are still unhappy about what are called the real numbers. And that's a whole different ballgame. It's just a completely different concept. Do they exist? I like to feel that something that's as clear and elegant as this is being shaped by our search. And it coalesces out of nothing because it's a shape that's there, that's created by our activity, that then takes form, and when we suddenly realise that it has such an elegance and such a simplicity, then it forms up. I don't think we invent it, but I don't think its existence is independent. So I'm going to sit firmly on the fence, which is an uncomfortable position, but I'm going to sit firmly on the fence and say that it can't be a pure artifact. There is a progression and an elegance about it that means there's an inevitability about it, which means that we didn't invent it. We discovered it, but it was there because of our search. And the interesting thing is that whilst everybody had a different view of it at the time, so many people came up with exactly the same thing. So I feel that it can't be pure invention. Pure invention tends to be something where you think, oh, I could never have thought of that. Siteswap is, if only I'd thought about it, then I'd have come up with that. I think Siteswaps as a description, as a notation, as a way of thinking about this aspect is definitely from the book. It's so elegant, so clean, so clear. It's definitely from the book. What you do is, at any given instant of time, I'm going to throw a ball, and at some instant of time, I'm going to throw that ball again. So mark the throw time on here, the catch time on here, and connect them with a straight line. So if I'm doing a 3-ball cascade, at time 0, I'll next throw at time 3. At time 1, I'll next throw at time 4. So the 3-ball cascade just ends up being a collection of parallel lines. And in fact, cascades and fountains are always just collections of parallel lines, because the balls always take it in turns. But if you do a siteswap, a non-trivial siteswap, so they do, what happens is the lines swap around. But you still have, for every place, one line coming out, for every place, one line coming in, because that's the rule. One throw out, one catch in. And now you can think of this as a function from numbers to numbers. Okay? And that's a beautiful way of thinking about it, which takes you back into the realm of really quite abstract mathematics. And you can start to deal with infinite concepts, and it doesn't have to be from a number line to a number line. You can do it from more complicated objects to more complicated objects, and this becomes a way of describing club passing, and also for people who happen to be exceptionally gifted and have 7 hands, it gives you a way of describing that much more naturally than siteswaps alone would do. It's a way of generalizing it that gives you a much greater one. A large selection of siteswaps that I have in my mind as being of particular interest. 5551, I love it. I just love it because it was the first one that we discovered, the first juggling trick that popped out of the maths. We'd never done it, we'd never seen it, we didn't know it was possible. It had to be possible because of where it came from. And it worked. And it looks like 5, it feels like 5. It's just so nice. And 441, it's intimate friend, the fake box. And it's just so casual. And people who've never done siteswaps find it so weird to do. And yet it just flows, and it's so gorgeous to do. 501, the 2-ball siteswap. It's so hard. You get it this high, and it's so fast, and people just can't tell what's going on. 531, 1 ball showering this way, 1 ball showering this way, the other ball's cascading between. They're all superb in their own way. I think my favourite of the ones that I tend to do as a demonstration is 45141, partly because the 5-1 can be stretched. You've got a non-obvious entry and a non-obvious exit, cascade on either side, 3-ball shower in the middle. 4 was just never thought of as an entry into 5-1, and 4-1 was never thought of as an exit. It's just such a beautiful example. Then you can throw away the 5 and turn it into 4014. It's a 2-word pattern. 45141 is the example I always give. It's just so nice. And I can do it